the exhibition also show a special moment in your life, probably a trading part, where you came across a Roger Corman factory, and it doesn't surprise because Corman helped so many filmmakers to But there is one film I would like to ask you, because this is a film that is maybe we cannot brand as a pure Corman film, because it escaped from New York by John Carpenter, and there is a couple of amazing photographs with you doing the Matty painting of the skyline and doing the New York skyline in Los Angeles. I would like to ask you something about your collaboration in that film, which is iconic, and so maybe you can tell something about
Sure. The way that came about is these kids, basically, I mean, we were in our 20s, but we were young, we were ambitious, we had a lot of ideas, we had a lot of energy, we could work all day and all night, we were working for Roger on Battle Beyond the Stars, and we created an entire visual effects facility. We had motion control, we had an optical printer, we had everything, we had all these bright young minds, and then that project ended. And I was at a party, and I was introduced to the production designer of Escape from New York, and he said, we have to do all these effects, and we have to do them really cheaply. We don't have a lot of money. I said, we can do them for you. And so literally, I kind of made a handshake deal with the guy. His name was Joe Alves, and he took it back to Carpenter, John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, the producers of Escape from New York. So interestingly, it became this marriage of two low-budget cultures. One a little more advanced than ours, in that John Carpenter is an established filmmaker. He was kind of up the food chain, but it's still working at quite modest budgets. And we were these young, hungry visual effects experts. And so we just jammed these two cultures together. And of course, I didn't think of ever being like a Kubrick or a Spielberg. That was impossible. But I thought John Carpenter was a role model, right? Because he came up from nothing and he did so much with very little money. And that was my example. The highest thing I could imagine was to be a John Carpenter, right? So to get to work with him was a great experience. Watch him work, he was just very fast and very, very focused, kind of brusque, which was fine. We were there to do a gig. And we got to bring all of our talents and put them into more of a real-world kind of framework, because we had been doing, interplanetary science fiction, which is more gestural, more broadly imaginative. And his was very stark and real, New York, World Trade Center, things like that. So it was a great experience for us, and working for somebody else besides Roger Corman. A very formative moment in my life as a filmmaker. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, and maybe it's not a coincidence. It's for a reason that after the experience with Roger Corman, you envision the film that was the big breakthrough, which is The Terminator, and then I would like to show to our audience one of the many items we are displaying. So it's not Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's not even maybe The Terminator, but it's a drawing which I personally liked a lot. And again, there are two elements. On one hand, we have the machine, and we consider the machine almost inhuman, but here we have the knife, and we have the teeth, and we have a machine that kind of strive to survive or strive to kill. So I think it's a very original vision of the machine, especially for those years. So I know that The Terminator was a project that you had in mind at the beginning of the 80s, 82, but then the film took a little bit longer to put together the budget, so you realize a lot of, you managed to make a lot of drawings, technical drawings, and also regarding The Terminator, which is also dealing with the AI nowadays. So maybe you can tell us about the starting point, this idea of a machine that is half human in a way, because it's has maybe not emotion, but some kind of feeling, emotion too.
Well, look, the image that you've chosen is actually one of my favorites. There's a lot of narrative information. You can see that he's been damaged. He's been broken in half in some way, in my mind, by an explosion. There's the Carpenter influence, the knife, the slasher movie. He's just out of frame, in my mind, is the crawling woman who's trying to get away from death, from the implacable killer, right? Yeah. And even if you look very closely at that drawing, you can see little tick marks in the floor where the knife has pulled him forward a few inches at a time. And so there's a kind of an inexorable, machine-like almost rhythm. In my mind, I can imagine him moving in these jerks, forward like that in a very machine-like way. But he's also clearly a skeleton. He's very skeletal, so that's a death image. But it's also a form that could fit inside a human body. And that, to me, was critical. So within that image, it's saying, okay, there was a time when he tried to blend in and appear to be a human. Because as we know now, robots don't have to appear human at all. They can be on wheels, they can be on treads, they can be insect-like, they can be dog-like. They don't have to look like us. There has to be a reason for an enemy, an adversarial robot, to look like us, which would be to blend in, to have protective coloration, right, to be an infiltrator. And these were all the ideas, but the image came first, and then the story was fitted to the image. That's what's interesting. I had two seminal images. One was the dream that I've spoken of, where I see a chrome skeleton emerging out of the fire. This is a later part of that same progression. Within a day or so, when I started drawing, I was in Rome at the time, right? Had no money. I was completely broke. I was in this little pensione. I was overdue, paying for my room. I had the image of the chrome skeleton, and then I took the story further. Okay, he's been damaged. He's been crushed. He's been cut in half, but he doesn't stop, right? And the next thing I did was a pencil sketch, and I think there's a version of that actually in the show. And then from that, a year or so later, I did this more finished drawing, maybe a year, and I hadn't written the story yet, because you can see he's got a knife, which is not in the story. The final confrontation where he's cut in half takes place in a factory, right? Yeah. And he's not pulling himself across the floor with a knife, he's just doing it with his hand. So the story changed, but the seminal impulse was the same.
So most of the drawings, the sketches that are displayed in the exhibition are not part of the films. They are behind. They stay maybe some years before the film. There are some that are in the film. So I would like to show one because it's in the film. Actually, it's part of the film itself, which is the drawing of the portrait of Rose, a very famous one. And so maybe we can show to the. It's. I guess everyone knows this portrait because it's part of the film. It's the portrait that is drawn on the film by and the fiction by Jake, but in reality is you that were drawing Kate. Right. So yeah, maybe you can tell something about that because it's.
In the movie, when we see Leonardo drawing, right, and what a perfect name for the actor to play an artist, right? But we see Leonardo DiCaprio drawing. He's right-handed, so he's just sketching away. Now Leo couldn't draw at all, so I had done that drawing, and we had done all the scenes where they find the drawing and they pull it out of the ocean and they clean it off and all that sort of thing. So I had done that drawing very quickly. I did it just days before we started shooting because we were out of time. I had done a little photo shoot with Kate Winslet. She was wearing, I think, a bathing suit or a bra and panties. I don't remember. She didn't pose nude because I didn't know her that well. I said, Kate, I'm just going to use my imagination for the bits that I can't see. And she looked at me stone-faced, which is very Kate Winslet, and said, they're just fucking nipples. I said, okay, no problem. I got this. But when we were in post-production, I needed some shots of Jack sketching. The problem is I draw left-handed, and Leo is well-established drawing right-handed. Now, I couldn't draw right-handed to save my life, so I had to do the drawing backwards.
Yeah.
right? And then we flip the film. So it's actually my left hand is in the movie as Leo's, as Jack's right hand. And that sounds like a trivial problem, but it's not, because when you sketch, it's all about the fulcrum of your wrist. So all of your shading forms an arc, which is specific, and it's very, if you've ever tried to copy a signature that's from a right-handed person, left-handed, or vice versa, it doesn't work at all. So that's why in the movie I was limited just to some of the line work, because I could do the line work, but I couldn't do the shading. It's a little bit of movie trivia, not important, but I was literally out in my garage one night at the editing, because I was editing at my house, talking to my wife on the phone, Susie. We weren't married at the time, and drawing, and just talking and just drawing without thinking. Because if you think too much, you get paralyzed. So I was just drawing away, and we were filming it. We just kept filming everything that I did. And I find that a lot, which is I need to be kind of a little bit distracted and let the subconscious flow through, when I'm sketching a painting.
I don't know if it's my way of watching this portrait, but also the other drawings that are in the film and are part of the exhibition. But they look different from the other drawings you did, even the portrait. So it's like maybe unconsciously you were performing a Jake character. I don't know.
This is an interesting idea. What I wanted to do with Jack's art, because I did his whole portfolio, I wanted to show that he was just an observer of people, that he could connect. He could see a little bit of their soul. You see in the rose drawing that there's an almost Caravaggio or Rembrandt-like lighting where everything sort of goes away, not into shadow, but just into indistinctness. And what's in focus is her face and her hands. And I wanted to make Jack very much about people's hands as an expression of them, And so even though he's drawing these prostitutes and these dancers and so on in Bohemian Paris, he's focusing on who they are. Not, even though the women are nude often, he's not objectifying them or sexualizing them. He's making them people. And so that was an important thing. I wanted Rose, Kate's character, to see that in his drawings, that there was something there that was much more human, and connected, emotionally connected. So it was a bit of a challenge for me to create his whole portfolio. He's drawing children, he's drawing parents, he's drawing a woman nursing. Nursing in public would have been very taboo in those days, So clearly he was in the Bohemian quarter of Paris at the time. He's pushing boundaries, he's pushing social boundaries. There's a lot said in that art that's part of the texture of the movie and of his character.
Absolutely. But speaking about portrait, we would like to show you our last drawing image, which is also our key visual for the exhibition. It's the portrait that stays at the beginning of the Neytiri character. So we are now in the Avatar universe. Can you tell us something about this? In our exhibition, Kim and our architect, they had this idea to display it as a kind of Mona Lisa, because there is a kind of mystery, a kind of, we can see, there is a mirroring, but there is also a distance. And I think this is also what makes your Navi so fascinating. They are similar but different from us. So maybe you can tell us something about the creation of these creatures.
See, you're posing the question exactly correctly. Is what is familiar and what is different? We're proposing an alien species. When I asked artists to join me and they started just freely kind of imagining what the Navi would look like, I was getting a lot of fish people and reptile people and things like that, things that were relatively off-putting. I thought, all right, how can we be different but be appealing? Okay, large eyes, cat-like features, a kind of a feline, feral quality. How far did I want to take that? I did that drawing. We hadn't cast Zoe yet. We were still in the conceptual phase. But I did that drawing to make Neytiri real for everybody as a person. but also have some alien qualities. If you look at Zoe Saldana, she's absolutely exotically beautiful, but she's also a normal human in the sense that the distance between her eyes is quite normal. But I was looking at lions and seeing how far apart their eyes were and how wide their noses are, tigers and that sort of thing. So I wanted to say, all right, how far can we push human before it becomes enough inhuman to be alien and yet still appealing and aspirational for the audience? So a lot of detail in the lips. I wanted to say that the mouth of the actor will be the mouth of the character, right? And so even though we were pushing the upper part of the face and moving the ears up and creating very feline ears and very exotic hairstyles and very long necks, what are we holding on to that's human or that is appealing to humans in our animal companions? And obviously I chose someone very feline. The interesting thing is that drawing is also based on a photograph of a young actress who was in Terrence Malick's The New World, and so I actually showed my art team, here's a photograph of the young actress, here's the character derived from her. This is the relationship I want between whomever we cast and what that final character will look like, because I wanted the actor's presence and persona to come through these alien characters and not be masked by it, right? If we had tried to do it with makeup, we'd be adding a bunch of rubber pieces like they do in Star Trek, and God bless them, we all grew up with that, right? That was the way you did it up until Avatar. We wanted to push through to something that was more organic to the actor, if that makes sense. So that drawing actually was kind of a critical moment in our artistic pathway, and then the next step was casting Zoe, and then creating a Neytiri based on Zoe Saldana.
So, and the choice of Zoe is also because this is something I become aware also by just a little time I had that I spent in your studios. It's your shooting is also kind of dance performing, and Zoe as a background as a dancer. So I don't know if that plays a role, or maybe if you can tell something about the choreography that is. I think it's very relevant in Avatar especially.
Absolutely, we wanted them to move in a certain way that was not quite human, and so we came up with a posture, a way of moving for her, a way of sitting. They don't just sit on the ground as we would. They kind of squat more like a cat would with their feet forward, their tail wrapped around. We had to come up with a whole kind of physical repertoire for all of the actors. Now Zoe was cast first, so we had to have a language and then and its pronunciation. And because I believe she learned her Spanish before her English, she can go into a Spanish pronunciation with the tapped R and things like that very, very quickly. So Zoe was the thought leader in how the language itself is pronounced and what the sort of pidgin English, deeply accented version of would be. She had to pioneer all that, and all the other actors had to copy her because she was in first. She also was a classically trained in ballet dancer, and so she had the physicality, the litheness, the grace, the kind of feline motion. We worked a lot on that before we actually started capture, because the capture gets everything. I mean, you can't hide from the capture process. We're getting 100% of your facial performance. We're getting 100% of your physical body performance. How we choose to shoot that later, are we in a full body shot or are we in a tight close-up? We choose that later. So the important thing is to have a kind of integrity, from the actors outward at the moment that the performance is captured. It's much more like stage, I think, even to an extent dance, than it is like cinematography. In a funny way, we do the capture work, and then we do the cinematography later of what's the light doing? Is it day? Is it night? All that sort of thing. So we take the essence of the character in the moment, And then later, with the actors already gone working on something else, Zoe's off working on Guardians of the Galaxy or whatever, then we're working with that captured essence, which is extremely detailed. We have it at an almost molecular level, what the actors did. I then have the time to apply the lighting, to orchestrate the background, maybe there are crowds around and so on. So it's an interesting process because it separates performance from cinematography. I mean, I've had lots of real world experience over the years making movies like True Lies and Titanic, whatever, at big scale with lots of extras and all that. I love the freedom away from worrying about how long it takes to move the Musco light from one side of the set to the other, how long it takes to choreograph all of the extras and all of the vehicles moving and all that. To get that image of Kate Winslet in the foreground of my shot, I have to orchestrate all those other things. It takes away from my time with the actors at a critical moment, in the story, perhaps, something that's really important to the character. So I actually love the capture work because I can focus. That's where I'm not just a director, but I'm also the writer, thinking about the characters. And I'm just keyed in to the actors so directly, right? And I don't think about all the scenery and the lighting and the clouds in the sky and how much sun I've still got left. I worry about all those things later. And I love that part of it too, fortunately. I'm an artist, I'm a painter, I love painting. I get to paint separately from the work of the heart, so to speak. And so it's almost like you take your mind and you divide it into two separate lobes, and you work with the first lobe first, and then you work with the other more analytical lobe later. It's kind of an amazing process, actually.